prayer. It was called the prayer walk in Washington yesterday, and there was a speaker named Jonathan Cahn, and he had a lot to say. He's a Messianic Jew, and he had just the bravery to stand in front of this large crowd in front of the nation's capital and speak about things that most people are not willing to talk about in public whatsoever. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I wanted to know if you saw it, and if you saw it, what you thought about it in general. That was my question. I guess just
keep going. Share your feedback.
Well,
what do you think?
Back when I was watching it, I thought it was pretty incredible because, again, like I said, most people don't speak about these issues publicly, and he tied a lot of things into it. He spoke about 9/11 and Ground Zero, and he had mentioned something very, very interesting to me because he said 9/11 on Ground Zero, back when George Washington gave his inaugural speech. That's where he gave his inaugural speech, and during his inaugural speech, he pretty much like dedicated like the country to God, like this is God's country. And it was like on 9/11 on Ground Zero where the attacks happened. And he said, biblically speaking, I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it, but biblically speaking, there was I don't even want to get into it because I can't even say it right because it was earlier today that I had checked it out.
Good.
I thought it was, I can't even flesh it out properly. But yeah, it was. I don't know if you saw it or not. If you did see it, I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Yo, this is such an interesting topic. Shout out to you for bringing this up because I've been thinking about making a video on it, and I try not to talk about people. I try to talk about ideas, right? Just because I think sometimes you can kind of get into the weeds of like. I just don't want to ever speak ill of anybody, right? But let's just talk about the ideas. Now my man's let me pull it up because I don't want to pass it off as an original idea. But my man's Amin just did a fantastic live stream with KB on Southside Rabbi, talking about conspiracy theories, the mark of the beast, so on and so forth, right? It was a really, really good clip they got that I hope is going viral, that Christians really need to hear. We need to go make it go viral. And he said this quote to me, and you guys may not like this because listen, I listened to Jonathan Cahn's, I think that's how you say his last name, right? Jonathan Cahn. He's a post-Messianic Jew. You guys have probably seen him around. Let me pull up a picture of him so people can kind of know who I'm talking about. He's been going viral for a while, and I'm not gonna cap like I know everything because I do not know a lot of this stuff. Okay, but I'm just gonna genuinely give you guys my thoughts about this stuff. Okay, so hold on, let me pull him up here. You guys have probably seen this brother. So he's doing a lot of like end days prophecy stuff, and anyway. So he is a post-Messianic Jew, so on and so forth, and my man Amin said this yesterday on this clip. He said, "We're Americanizing eschatology. We're Americanizing eschatology." Now, Pastor Roy is in here. He's a pastor. Okay, so you guys, maybe we could refer back to a pastor. Just a rapper talking about pastor things. You can hear from a pastor. Okay,
and I listened to that episode today, just so you know. I actually was listening to that on my way to church. So, yeah.
Praise God.
Yeah,
Praise God.
Cool,
this is a good topic. I love you guys. I love you guys because you guys literally, like, the content makes itself when y'all ask these questions. So thank you, Range. Okay, so Jonathan Cahn, I watched his long form interview on Valuetainment. I thought it was brilliant. I was like, this is cool. But then I started thinking about this. Really? Like, America is like the freaking apple of God's eye, and we've dedicated this country, and it only the prophetic stuff only applies to us because, oh gosh, we're special Americans. And in Revelations, when it says that the trumpet will sound, it's actually talking about Donald Trump because his name is Trump, and it talked about a trumpet. And like, come on, fam. Come on, bro. Now, listen. This is my opinion.
Straight heresy, fam.
This is not legal advice. This is not legal advice. This is not Ruslan's eschatology. This is just my opinion. I think it's a stretch. I think it's very, very, very America-centric. I think it makes us the center of the universe, and we have a tendency to think that way and already act that way. And so the Jonathan Cahn stuff, bro, he could be 150% on point. But because, this book and the Bible talks about the cedar tree, and then the cedar tree collapsed near 9/11, and then a different kind of tree grew up, and then it was around the same time we passed, same-sex marriage, and then like he's just like weaving all these things together, and I still can't figure out, are these books fiction or are they real? Like I literally can't figure out, is this like a theological book? Is he calling himself a prophet? It's all very convoluted, confusing, and I think it goes back to Americans, but more specifically Christians, have been obsessing with eschatology, and eschatology is the study of the end times, since the dawn of time. We've been thinking that Jesus is coming back in our lifetime. The apostles were expecting a literal return of Jesus as they were writing the scripture. They literally thought Jesus was going to come back in their lifetime, right? So this goes back to as far as the church, like we are expecting Jesus to come back, and no man knows the hour. We don't know when he's coming back, and trying to weave in the establishment of Jerusalem was exactly 50 years from this date, and then this date ties into this, and then 9/11 happened, and exactly this many years later Trump made this speech, and I just think it's a lot of interesting things. I think God is sovereign. I think God is still on the throne. I think Jesus will always be on the throne, and I don't have personally, and I'm not saying you're obsessing over this stuff, Range, I don't have the time to sit here, because listen, I know if Jesus comes back tomorrow, your boy's going to heaven. I'm good. You know what I'm saying? And if Jesus don't come back tomorrow, your boy's still going to heaven, and I got a lot of work to do on earth. And that's just how I view it. I want to hear from Pastor Roy, because he's a pastor. He's probably smarter than me when it comes to all this stuff. Pastor Roy, what do you think when it comes to just a lot of us talking about this stuff and kind of centering our eschatology around America? I think it's interesting, but go for it.
Yeah, that's one of the big things I've had a problem, right? And Amin talked about it, and I love when you listen to something and it's kind of like highlighting all the stuff that you think about. So I think Amin and KB were on point, because and it's funny because Range and I have actually had this discussion before, just when it comes to conspiracies as well. In general, right? Like they keep us distracted. So it keeps us distracted with some like ambiguous figure that we can't put our hands around, that we can't hold on to. And then to your point, it gets us down these rabbit holes and YouTube videos and, in message boards and websites and all of this other stuff. But from a biblical perspective, and it's weird because like I kind of go back to World War II. So, right, if you had Messianic Jews during World War II who read Revelations, right, because Hitler was killing people not based on religion, right? He was killing people based on ethnicity. So that means he was killing Jews who were professing Christians. So if you think about it in that context, you don't think in the 1940s somebody was like, this is the end time? So when people want to relate that to like common persecution because we have to wear a mask, right? Or the vaccine will be the mark of the beast. Like Jews actually got marked, right? And they went through that entire process, and people were being burned in ovens and being killed because of their ethnicity, and to a certain degree because of the faith that they professed. And here we are 60 plus, almost 80 years later, we're still here, right? So like all of this focus in a very nationalistic. Anytime I hear prophecy that sounds nationalistic, I just have a feeling that it's rooted in white supremacy. So that's a whole nother issue that we got to deal with in America, that, the love of America is rooted in the collective whiteness of the country and the supremacy that it's built on. So even Jesus's priority is this country. But whenever you have the nationalistic kind of tone in prophecy, right, and all of these end times things, you kind of lose me in general, right? Because I'm like, God's people are not just here. There are people in China being persecuted for their faith right now. There are people in the Middle East. There are people in the Philippines. There are people in Thailand. We all pray for and we follow these people that do these global missions, but then we act like the struggle for Christianity is something that's inherently American, when Christianity isn't even inherently American, right? Nor do we really try to represent it. But I think it's a good point. I really think everybody should check out that second episode. I'm glad they let the smoke roll, right? They took some shots on that episode and pointed some stuff out, but because it's getting crazy right now, right? We can't trust truth, and there's no clarity, and it's creating division within the body that doesn't need to be there. So that's my biggest concern, is that I've seen you talk about it. You've got the shirt on, politically agnostic, right? If you don't believe this conspiracy theory, then you're not woke, you're not aware, you're a sheep, you're a clone, and it's this disrespect of each other based on perspectives of information, and not ultimately based on how we see whether or not we agree on how we achieve salvation, right? Like, I want everybody on here to know that if Jesus came back today, you're going to heaven, yep. Right? Whether or not Donald Trump is the Antichrist, or Obama was the Antichrist, or Black Lives Matter is witchcraft is irrelevant to me, really. It's what are you doing in your community that God calls you to do, that's allowing you to make an impact in what, in what you see is wrong with the world. But I'll stop preaching.
Yeah, that's good. And you said it's tough. You said it's people can't trust truth, and by truth you simply mean what, like mass information, like mass media, and how everybody kind of has a platform and thinks they have the truth, or really what it is like, I have this special knowledge that only we know over here, and you don't know it, but we, right? That's kind of what you mean by trust truth, not absolute truth, Bible, biblical, Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life truth, right?
Yeah, it's even facts, right? Like something you observe. Like, so for instance, when George Floyd got killed, one of the early things that started circulating was that wasn't George Floyd. So like the whole world is watching an 8-minute and 40-second video with a man who's identified, recognized by his daughter, right? And then people are like, that's not George Floyd. Like, that was a body double, and this was like an Illuminati sacrifice. Like,
oh my gosh.
I was getting that in my Facebook inbox from Christians. And I'm like, how is this possible? Go watch the video. Like, when did they pull another person in there? Like, look at his picture and look at his face. And so even that, right? Like, there's things that we can directly observe, and we can easily be tricked into what I just saw isn't what I saw. So even like the objective truth of what we observe, or what we can touch, or what we can experience, we're being told that that's a lie, right? Like that's not even probable. And it goes into the virus and everything else as well, right? Like it doesn't matter. We can't trust science, right? Like washing hands doesn't kill viruses now. All of a sudden, it has forever, right? It's work. I work in healthcare, right? And Range got his scrubs on right now, like. It's worked forever, but now with the virus, it's like, nah, man, that don't work. Like, really, man? It's been proven science for hundreds of years that soap works.
I think we got to be careful whenever something is trying to make you feel like there's a special knowledge. Whenever something is trying to amplify a us versus them mode of thinking. Whenever something. And here's the deal. Like, listen, and they said this on the Southside Rabbi podcast. You guys should all go listen to it. A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times, the truth is just not that interesting, right? Like, the truth is just not that interesting. And our brains are trying to make sense of everything that's going on. And like, this is a wild year, guys. And we're trying to make sense. And it's like, it's tough to make sense out of something that sometimes is just a simple answer. When is Jesus coming back? When he wants to. When the Father says he's supposed to come back. When is Jesus coming back? The only thing that has a scriptural reference that makes the most amount of sense to me is he says the gospel will be preached to every nation and every tongue. Right? I know that, and I know there's something in there about the temple being rebuilt. I know those two things. As far as I know, there's still tribes and there's still languages that the gospel has not been preached in. There's still indigenous people on islands that haven't heard the gospel. That means that we haven't even done that, right? And again, this is from Jesus' mouth. No man knows the day or the hour. He'll come like a thief in the night. But that's one of the things I've seen in eschatology. That's kind of unanimously agreed upon. Every nation will receive that. So if we're looking at this thing and we're like, yo, this is what this is why the world is crazy and this thing and the trumpet in Revelations is referring to Donald Trump because his name says Trump and has trumpet. We're like, come on, man. Like, listen, sometimes the truth is just more boring. Jesus will come back when Jesus feels like coming back. You know what I mean? When God sends him back. That's it. Like, and until then, what are we called to do? We're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. We're called to lead. We're called to make disciples. You know, I think we'd be better off focusing on those things than in necessarily being distracted by all these other things. And they're fun. Like, let's be honest. Like, conspiracies are fun. Like, it's fun to feel like we have this special knowledge. It's fun to try to piece things together and feel like it's an episode of Matlock and we're an investigative journalist, right? It's fun. I get it, but we can blur the lines of truth and it could get real murky and it could get real time consuming. So I just don't spend a lot of time on that stuff. Does anybody else want to chime in before we move on?
And Ruslan, I just wanted to say one more thing that Amin said, and I love the way that I love the illustration that they use, right? When they said that, like, your opportunity to present information to somebody, it's like a bullet in a clip. Right. So you can only, and they were like, you can only shoot so many shots. So, like, if you're online and you're constantly talking about every conspiracy theory and the earth is flat, right, and it's a pandemic and blah, 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 blah. If you're spending your time so absorbed with those distractions, by the time an opportunity actually presents itself for you to present the gospel, you have no ammo left. Right. Because you've said so much stuff that's distracted people, that's been false, that's been proven false. You actually lose your credibility as somebody who's supposed to be able to represent the gospel, right? So I think that's the one thing as Christians we have to be mindful of. And sometimes I post on my timeline, like, I think there's going to be a section of heaven or hell where you're going to be held accountable for your social media content that, like, you were sharing lies intentionally and you never repented for. Like, how many people genuinely repent for what they put in other people's view? Right, without any regard for it, right? Maybe you're strong and it doesn't matter, but you're being an obstacle, right? It says don't be a stumbling block to your brethren. So why are you peddling conspiracy theories to people who don't have a strong mind and who can easily get distracted and get caught up and, wind up being the Pizzagate dude running into the pizza spot with a gun because he think there's children in the basement and the building doesn't even have a basement, right? So that's the concern that I have for Christians. Like, we have to be mindful because as we peddle this stuff as well, there are people that we're supposed to be a light, right? And conspiracy theories are just shadowy. So how much can we be representing light when we're constantly spreading shadows everywhere?
Real quick, before you move forward too,